I guess that the line of police officers in my family would start with my great grandfather. Originally, during Prohibition, he was, one of the guys who would catch the run runners and, bust all the speakeasies and the organized crime.
He was killed in 1930. At the time, I remember my father telling the story about how, when it happened. He said he was at home. They lived in East Boston at the time, and they lived on a hill. I actually know where it is because I worked over that way a lot. He said it was January. It was snowing, pretty bad snowstorm, and early in the day, he didn't know this time. Obviously, his father had gone with a captain and another guy out to get a guy in the south end of Boston who was wanted for armed robberies and things like that. And they went to I think it was a 3-story tenement building, and there was a captain, the station captain was there, and another officer. He was in plain clothes. He wasn't a detective, but he was working plain clothes.
When he heard the knock at the door and he heard that the police were at the door, he went upstairs into a neighbor's apartment.
My grandfather went up the rear decks of this building, and when he got to the third deck, I would believe it was, a porch on the back, the guy had opened the window. As he got up to the thing, he shot him in the head. He went down in the snow. The guy ran down past him and ran away, grabbed a taxi and got away. And they found my grandfather with a bullet in his head, bleeding out in the snow in the back. So he never came to or anything.
The Boston police had been notified that a police officer had been shot and killed. So as a result, they had started a citywide search. The papers claimed that it was probably the most swift and quickly organized and very thorough search that the Boston Police Department had had at the time. And within less than 2 hours, they had found Threadgill. I guess they burst in, knowing that he was there. They got a tip from a guy over in the South End. And so, without any warning, they kind of stormed in immediately. He didn't even have time to draw his gun, nothing. They just grabbed him. They found the same exact gun, the same exact model that would have shot the bullet.
My father told the story of how he was home playing around in the house. His mother was pregnant with what would be my father's younger brother, Tommy. So she was bedridden. She was upstairs in the bed with a broken pelvis and very pregnant, which is not a good thing to break your pelvis when you're pregnant. And he remembered how there was a knock at the door, and they opened the door, and it was just snow blowing in. It was, they had trudged up the hill on foot because they couldn't make it up in anything else. It was his uncle, Tom, who was a police officer. And he ran to the door and he said, "Oh, Dad's home, Dad's home." And they opened the door and he said, "Oh, it's just Uncle Tom and the priest." So he said he remembered thinking, Uncle Tom was kind of solemn, which usually he's kind of a funny guy. And, it wasn't unusual to see the priest there because, the priest would come in and check in on his mother, in those days, those, parishes everywhere in Boston. There was, 100 churches, 100 parishes. So the priest and his Uncle Tom had gone upstairs. He said, and then he heard his mother screaming, crying, and he knew something was wrong. And then they eventually told them. My dad said he didn't stop crying for about 5 days.
One of the guys who caught Threadgill was Michael H. Crowley, and later on, after the whole incident, he had stopped by my grandfather's house with his mother and his sisters and everything. And his grandpa used to run around the house wearing his father's hat, and being only 8 years old at the time, he wanted to be able to wear his dad's hat and keep his dad's hat. Now, apparently, there was a dispute regarding whether or not he was able to keep the badge number on the hat, because that would make it an official police uniform. Now, as a result, that badge number in particular, 623, I believe it was, it's more important because that kind of signifies that it was his father. And when he was offered the hat without the badge, he was upset. And Michael Crowley saw to it himself that he got that badge number to my grandfather. He made my grandfather at 8 years old an honorary police officer, so that way he could be able to wear the uniform and have the hat. I found it interesting because a little while after my grandpa had passed away, we were looking through his things, and on his dresser I saw a piece to a police officer's hat, and I can't remember where it went or exactly what the number was on it, but I could swear the number probably was 623, which would have been my great-grandfather's. So that means to the end of his days he held on to that, which meant a lot to him. Another interesting thing regarding the same article was the last few lines in the article I remember reading. It said something along the lines of, I hope that if he does become a police officer, I hope that he has better fortune than his father did. Little did he know, years later, my grandfather became a very successful police officer, successful father, and probably one of the biggest inspirations to many people I know to this day. And I guess that's where the real story kind of starts.